The war had lasted for 300 years. 300 years of death, of burning worlds, of species vanishing from the stars forever. The Collective, a union of 47 alien races, had fought against the swarm since before most of their members could remember peace. And they were losing. Commander On stood on the bridge of her warship and watched another planet die. The world below had been called Prime. 6 billion souls had lived there just 3 days ago. Now there was nothing but fire and the black ships of the swarm moving through the smoke like hungry insects. Her people had blue skin and silver eyes, and they lived for nearly 500 years. She had seen too many worlds die in her lifetime. She had lost count of the funerals, the memorials, the moments of silence for species that no longer existed. Her second officer, a young male named, approached her with a data tablet in his hands. His face was pale, which meant he had news that would not be good. "Commander," he said quietly, "the Council has sent new orders." Did not turn from the window. Let me guess, another retreat, another defensive line, another hope that the swarm will simply stop. "No, Commander, something different," held out the tablet. "They want us to investigate a signal from the quarantine sector." That made turn. The quarantine sector was a region of space that no coalition ship had entered in 10,000 years. The ancient laws forbade it. The records said only that something dangerous lived there, something that had to be contained. "What kind of signal?" she asked. "Radio waves, primitive communication technology. But Commander, the signal is coming from a planet that should be dead." Took the tablet and read the report. Her silver eyes grew wide as she understood what she was seeing. The signal was coming from a small blue world orbiting a yellow star. The ancient archives called this world Earth, and the archives said that Earth had been sterilized during the first purge, 10,000 years ago. Every living thing on that planet should have been ash. But the signal was real. Someone was alive down there. "Set a course," ordered. "We need to see this for ourselves." The journey took 3 weeks. During that time, read everything the archives had about Earth and its inhabitants. The records were old and incomplete, but what she found disturbed her deeply. The species was called human. They had evolved on Earth under conditions that would have killed most other intelligent life. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was full of a corrosive gas called oxygen. The planet itself was covered in predators, diseases, and natural disasters. But the humans had survived, more than survived, they had thrived. The ancient records described them as violent, stubborn, and impossible to control. They fought constantly, not just against other species, but against each other. They refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They would rather die than admit they had lost. The first purge had been ordered because the Council at that time believed humans were too dangerous to exist. A fleet had been sent to Earth to end the species before they could spread to other worlds. The records said the mission was successful. The records were wrong. When ship entered the Sol system, she expected to find ruins. She expected to find the remains of a dead civilization, perhaps a few survivors living in caves and eating insects. What she found instead made her stop breathing for a full 10 seconds. Earth was not dead. Earth was alive and crowded and noisy with activity. Millions of lights glittered on the night side of the planet. Satellites orbited in neat patterns. Ships moved between Earth and its moon, carrying cargo and passengers. And those ships were not primitive. They were advanced. Not as advanced as coalition technology, but far beyond what a species should have achieved in only 10,000 years. "By the ancient stars," whispered beside her, "they rebuilt everything. They did it alone." Nodded slowly. The humans had been knocked down to nothing. They had been burned and broken and left for dead, and they had climbed back up without any help from anyone. She was beginning to understand why the ancients had feared them. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Let them know we are here." The response came faster than she expected. A human ship appeared on her sensors within minutes, moving at a speed that should have been impossible for its size. The ship was ugly by standards, all hard angles and heavy armor, but there was something about it that made nervous. The communication screen flickered to life, and saw a human face for the first time. The creature was tall and broad, with brown skin and dark eyes. He wore a uniform covered in symbols she did not recognize. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that reminded of a predator waiting to strike. "Unknown vessel," the human said. "This is Admiral Daniel Harper of the United Earth Navy. You have entered protected space. Identify yourself and state your intentions, or you will be considered hostile." Noted that he had not asked for permission to fire. He had simply stated what would happen if she did not answer. The humans, it seemed, did not waste time with empty threats. "Admiral Harper," she replied carefully, "my name is Commander On of the Collective. I come in peace with a message from the Galactic Council." The Galactic Council. The human's eyes narrowed slightly. "I was not aware there was a Galactic Council." "There is much you do not know, Admiral. Your people have been isolated for 10,000 years. The galaxy has changed, and I am afraid the news I bring is not good." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "We are at war, Admiral Harper. A war we are losing. The enemy is called the Swarm, and they have destroyed dozens of worlds. Billions have died, and we have run out of options." The human was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but steady. "Why come to us?" Met his eyes through the screen. "Because the ancient records say your species is dangerous. They say you do not know how to surrender. They say you will fight until your last breath and beyond." She paused. "We need that now. We need warriors who will not stop. We need you." Admiral Harper stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted into something that might have been a smile. "Commander," he said, "I think you had better come aboard. We have a lot to discuss." And with those words, humanity took its first step back onto the galactic stage. The delegation arrived on Earth 3 weeks after the first contact. Commander led the group, along with Ambassador, a tall creature with 6 arms and compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. They brought gifts, data files, and the desperate hope that these strange creatures would agree to help. Captain Laura Mitchell was assigned to escort them. She was a Navy officer with 20 years of experience, short brown hair, and a face that rarely showed emotion. Admiral Harper had chosen her because she was calm under pressure and did not frighten easily. She would need both qualities in the days ahead. The first thing the aliens noticed about Earth was the gravity. To humans, it was simply normal. It felt like wearing a heavy suit of armor that never came off. Ambassador could barely walk without assistance. "How do you function in this?" asked, her breathing already heavy after only an hour on the planet's surface. Laura shrugged. "You get used to it. We exercise. We build strong bones. It is just how we live." "Just how you live," repeated quietly. She was beginning to understand that nothing about humans was simple. The tour of Earth took several days. Laura showed them cities that stretched to the horizon, filled with millions of people living and working in close quarters. She showed them factories that produced ships and weapons at a rate the aliens found impossible. She showed them training facilities where human soldiers practiced combat for hours every day. But it was the history lessons that truly disturbed the visitors. In a museum in a city called Washington, Laura walked them through 10,000 years of human civilization. The aliens saw paintings of wars, photographs of destruction, and artifacts from conflicts that had killed millions. "You fought among yourselves," said, his voice clicking in confusion. "Your own species, why?" Laura thought about the question for a long moment. "We had different ideas, different beliefs, different wants. We fought over land, over resources, over power. Sometimes we fought because we were afraid. Sometimes we fought because we were angry. Sometimes we fought because we did not know any other way. And now, do you still fight each other? Not like we used to. We learned eventually. We united when we discovered we were not alone in the universe. She paused. But we never forgot how to fight. We never lost that instinct. Studied a photograph on the wall. It showed a ruined city. Buildings collapsed into rubble, smoke rising into a dark sky. The image was old, from a war that had happened centuries ago. "This is what you did to yourselves," she said softly. "Yes. And you survived." "We always survive. It is what we do." That night, the aliens were given quarters in a secure facility near the Navy headquarters. Laura checked on them before she went to sleep and found standing at a window, staring out at the city lights. "You cannot sleep?" Laura asked. Turn to face her. "I am trying to understand your people. I have studied many species in my lifetime. I thought I knew what made civilizations strong or weak, but humans do not fit any pattern I know." Laura came to stand beside her. "What do you mean?" "Your planet should have killed you. Your gravity is brutal. Your atmosphere is poisonous to half the species in the galaxy. Your history is filled with violence and death." Shook her head slowly. "Any other species would have gone extinct long ago, but you did not. You grew stronger. Every challenge, every disaster, every war made you harder to kill." "Maybe that is our gift," Laura said. "We do not give up. We do not know how." Was silent for a moment. "The swarm has never faced anything like you. They are used to enemies who run, who hide, who surrender when the fight becomes too hard. They do not understand an enemy who keeps fighting even when all hope is lost. Then they will learn." The formal meeting happened 2 days later. Human leaders from every nation gathered in a massive hall to hear what the aliens had to say. Ambassador explained the war, the stakes, and the offer. Join the coalition, receive advanced technology, and fight the swarm together. The debate lasted for weeks. Some humans wanted nothing to do with a war that was not their own. They argued that Earth should stay hidden, stay safe, stay out of galactic affairs. Let the aliens solve their own problems. Others disagreed. They said that the swarm would eventually find Earth on its own. Better to face the enemy now with allies than to wait until humanity stood alone against the darkness. Admiral Harper spoke last. He stood before the assembly, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, and he said the words that would change everything. "We have been alone for 10,000 years. We survived because we had no choice. We built our civilization from nothing because no one was coming to help us. We learned to fight because fighting was the only way to stay alive." He paused and looked around the room. "Now we have a choice. We can hide on our little world and hope the storm passes us by, or we can step out into the galaxy and show them what we have become." His voice grew stronger. "I say we show them. I say we take this fight to the enemy. I say we remind the universe why our ancestors were feared." The vote passed 3 days later. It was close, but it was enough. Humanity would go to war. Laura Mitchell was assigned to lead the first diplomatic convoy back to coalition space. She would serve as humanity's representative, their face to a galaxy that did not know them yet. Before she left, came to speak with her one last time. "I must warn you," they said. "The coalition does not trust you. They see you as primitives, as savages who know nothing but violence. They will give you old ships and bad assignments. They expect you to fail." Laura smiled, and there was something in that smile that made feel cold. "Good," Laura said. "We work best when people underestimate us." "You are not afraid." "Of course I am afraid. Fear is part of being human, but we do not let fear stop us. We use it. We turn it into strength." She looked out at the stars that would soon be her home. The coalition will learn that soon enough. Nodded slowly. She had delivered her warning. She had done her duty. But deep inside, she felt something she had not felt in centuries. She felt hope. Humanity was coming to the war, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first human fleets arrived at the front lines 6 months after Earth joined the coalition. They came in ships that the aliens considered outdated, armed with weapons that the coalition had stopped using decades ago. The commanders of the collective looked at the human vessels and saw cannon fodder. Lieutenant Commander understood this. He was not stupid. He could see the way the admirals looked at his ships, the polite smiles that did not reach their eyes, the careful words that meant nothing. He knew exactly what they expected from him and his crew. They expected him to die. His assignment was simple: hold Outpost Vega 7 at the edge of coalition territory. The outpost protected a supply line that fed 3 other defensive positions. If it fell, the entire sector would collapse. The coalition had given him 12 destroyers, old ships, slow ships, ships that any sensible commander would have scrapped years ago. His crew numbered 800 humans, most of them young and untested. They had trained for war their entire lives, but none of them had ever seen real combat. The swarm arrived on the 3rd day. Was on the bridge when the sensors lit up with enemy contacts. 47 swarm vessels came pouring out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry insects. They were black and organic, grown rather than built, covered in weapons that fired acid and plasma. His communications officer, a young woman named Sandra Cole, turned to face him. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Sir, the enemy outnumbers us 4-1. Coalition doctrine recommends immediate retreat to the secondary defensive line." Studied the tactical display. The swarm ships were fast and aggressive, but they were spreading out, trying to surround his position. It was a standard hunting formation. They expected him to run. "No," he said quietly. Sandra blinked. "Sir, we are not running. Signal all ships. We are going in." The bridge crew stared at him like he had lost his mind. Coalition ships did not charge at the swarm. Coalition ships maintained distance, fired from long range, and retreated when the enemy got close. That was how the war had been fought for 300 years. Did not care how the war had been fought. He cared about winning. "All ships full speed ahead. Target the lead vessel and concentrate fire. We are going to punch a hole right through them." The human destroyers lurched forward, their engines burning hot. The swarm ships adjusted their formation, confused by prey that attacked instead of fleeing. They had never seen this before. The first exchange of fire was brutal. 2 human ships took direct hits and began venting atmosphere, but the concentrated human fire tore the lead swarm vessel apart in seconds. The black ship exploded in a shower of organic matter and burning fuel. "Second target," ordered. "Keep moving, do not stop." The battle became chaos. Human ships weaved through the swarm formation, firing at point-blank range. They flew through debris fields that would have destroyed any vessel. They took risks that no coalition commander would have approved. The swarm tried to adapt, but humans were faster. When one tactic stopped working, changed to another. He sent ships in circles, doubled back, created false retreats, and set traps. He used the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover. He did things that the swarm had never seen in 3 centuries of war. Halfway through the battle, one of his destroyers was crippled by enemy fire. The ship was dying, its crew trapped. Coalition doctrine said to leave them, to sacrifice one ship to save the others. Ordered a rescue operation instead. 3 ships broke formation to retrieve the survivors while the remaining vessels covered them. It was foolish by coalition standards. It was something humans did without thinking. Every crew member was saved. The crippled ship was abandoned and detonated, taking 4 swarm vessels with it. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 4 ships. The swarm had lost 47. Every single enemy vessel was destroyed. The news spread through coalition space like wildfire. Officers who had dismissed humans as primitives watched the battle recordings with growing disbelief. They saw tactics they had never imagined, courage they did not understand, and a refusal to quit that seemed almost insane. Commander received the recordings on her ship, 3 sectors away. She watched them alone in her quarters, playing them over and over until she had memorized every moment. When came to check on her, she was still staring at the screen. "Commander, are you well?" Did not answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the image of a human destroyer ramming a swarm vessel twice its size. The human ship was destroyed in the collision, but so was the enemy. "They sacrificed themselves," she said softly. "Without hesitation, without orders. They simply saw a threat to their friends and decided that dying was an acceptable price." "That seems wasteful," said carefully. "No," shook her head. "It is something else, something we forgot long ago." She finally turned to face her officer. "We have been fighting this war with caution, with careful planning, with acceptable losses. We have been fighting not to lose. Is there another way? The humans fight to win. There is a difference." She looked back at the screen. "The swarm has been killing us for 3 centuries because we are afraid of them. The humans are not afraid, or if they are, their fear only makes them more dangerous." She stood and straightened her uniform. "Contact the Coalition Command. Tell them I am requesting transfer to the human sector. I want to observe them directly." "Commander, with respect, that sector is extremely dangerous." Smiled, and there was something new in her silver eyes, something that looked almost like the fire she had seen in. "Yes," she said, "that is exactly why I want to be there." 3 weeks later, she arrived at Outpost Vega 7. The station was still being repaired from the battle. Human engineers crawled over the hulls of damaged ships, welding and hammering and shouting at each other in their strange language. Met her at the airlock. He was shorter than she expected, with red hair and a face full of freckles. He did not look like a hero. He looked like a young man who had not slept in days. "Commander On," he said with a tired smile. "Welcome to the front lines. I hope you are ready for things to get interesting." Looked around at the busy station, the determined humans, the wreckage of swarm ships being collected for study. "Lieutenant Commander," she replied, "I believe interesting is exactly what we need. 1 year after humanity joined the war, everything changed." Admiral stood before the Coalition War Council and presented a plan that made the alien commanders gasp. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through anyone who met them. She had spent 40 years studying warfare, and she had never lost a campaign. "We have been defending for too long," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Every year we hold a line, they find a way around it. Every fortress we build, they eventually take. Defense is not working. It is time to attack." The High Commander, an ancient creature named Oran, shook his head slowly. "Attack the swarm. Their territory spans 1,000 systems. Their numbers are beyond counting. It would be suicide." "With respect, High Commander, we are already dying. The only question is whether we die slowly or quickly." Activated a holographic display showing the swarm's territory. "But we do not need to destroy them all. We need to cut off the head." She pointed to a planet deep in enemy space. It was dark and twisted, covered in organic structures that pulsed with a sickly light. "This is a prime, the of the swarm, and more importantly, the location of their primary hive mind." Silence fell over the council. Every species in the coalition knew about the hive mind. It was the central intelligence that coordinated the entire swarm. Without it, the individual swarms would lose their ability to work together. They would become scattered, confused, easy to defeat. "The hive mind is protected by the largest concentration of swarm forces in the galaxy," Oran said. "No fleet could reach it." "I am not proposing a fleet," smiled thinly. "I am proposing a surgical strike, A small team inserted quietly with one objective: destroy the hive mind or die trying. Colonel Cole volunteered before she finished speaking. He was 43 years old, with scars on his face and hands from a dozen battles. He had served in the human military since he was 18, fighting in small wars and peacekeeping missions that had prepared him for something exactly like this. He was not a man who knew how to quit. His team was made up of 200 volunteers. Every single one of them knew they might not come home. They signed up anyway. The insertion took 3 weeks. Human stealth ships, painted black and running silent, slipped through gaps in the swarm patrols. They moved slowly, carefully, using every trick that human intelligence officers had learned in a year of studying the enemy. When they reached a prime, looked at the planet through the viewport of his ship and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The world was alive, not with plants or animals, but with the swarm itself. The entire surface was covered in organic matter, pulsing like one enormous heartbeat. "This is it," he said to his team. "Once we land, there is no extraction. We fight until the mission is complete or until we are dead. Does everyone understand?" 200 voices answered as one, "Yes, sir." They landed in the dark, on the edge of a vast structure that their scans said contained the hive mind's neural center. The air was thick with spores, and the ground moved beneath their feet like living flesh. It was a nightmare made real. Led the way. His soldiers followed in tight formation, their weapons ready, their movements practiced. They had trained for this moment for 6 months. They knew every corridor, every likely enemy position, every backup plan for when things went wrong. Things went wrong almost immediately. The swarm detected them within the first hour. Drones poured from the walls, screaming with voices that were almost human. His team fought back with rifles and grenades, filling the organic tunnels with fire and blood. They lost 12 soldiers in the first engagement, then 20 more in the second. By the time they reached the halfway point, his force had been cut in half. He did not stop. He could not stop. Everything depended on reaching that central chamber. Private Amy Peters was the youngest soldier on the team. She was 22 years old, fresh out of training, and she had volunteered because her older brother had died in the first human battle against the swarm. She fought beside for 3 days, never complaining, never showing fear. On the 4th day, she was injured by acid spray from a dying drone. The wound was bad. She could not walk. "Leave me," she said, her voice tight with pain. "Take my charges, finish the mission." Knelt beside her. "We do not leave our people behind." "Sir, with respect, if you stay to help me, everyone dies. The mission fails. The war continues." She pressed her explosives into his hands. "Let me do something that matters, please." He wanted to argue. He wanted to find another way, but she was right and they both knew it. Left her with a rifle and a promise that her sacrifice would not be forgotten. He heard her firing long after his team moved on. Then he heard silence. The final chamber was exactly as their intelligence had predicted. A massive organic structure filled with neural tissue, pulsing with the thoughts of 1 billion drones. The hive mind itself. Had 47 soldiers left. They placed their charges quickly, efficiently, while the last of their ammunition held back the waves of defenders. When the final explosive was set, looked at his surviving team. "It has been an honor," he said simply. "The honor was ours, sir." He pressed the detonation trigger. The explosion was felt across the entire planet. The psychic backlash from the dying hive mind hit his team like a physical blow. 23 more soldiers died instantly, their minds overwhelmed by the death scream of 1 billion connected consciousnesses. Survived, he did not know why. Perhaps he was lucky. Perhaps he was simply too stubborn to die. When the dust settled, he stood in the ruins of the central chamber with 23 other survivors. The hive mind was gone. The pulsing had stopped. The planet felt dead in a way it had not felt before. Above them, the swarm fleet that had guarded a prime fell into chaos. Ships collided with each other. Weapons fired randomly. Drones flew in circles, unable to receive commands from a mind that no longer existed. The Coalition fleet, waiting at the edge of the system, watched in amazement as the largest swarm force in the galaxy tore itself apart. Commander was on the bridge of an battleship when the news arrived. She listened to the reports with tears running down her blue cheeks. She had thought she was too old to cry. The humans had proved her wrong. "They did it," whispered beside her. "By the ancient stars, they actually did it." Nodded slowly. "They said they would fight until the job was done. I did not truly believe them until now." On the surface of a prime, Cole gathered his surviving soldiers and began the long walk to the extraction point. A rescue shuttle was coming, sent as soon as the swarm fleet collapsed. He did not know if they would make it in time. He did not know if the shuttle could even land safely. But he kept walking anyway, because that was what humans did. They kept going, no matter what. Behind him, the remains of the hive mind smoked and burned. And across the galaxy, the swarm fractured into 1,000 pieces, suddenly unable to coordinate their endless war. The tide had finally turned. The final battle came 6 months after the death of the hive mind. Without their central intelligence, the swarm had broken into fragments. 1,000 lesser hives fought alone, unable to coordinate, unable to think beyond their immediate survival. The coalition had won victory after victory, pushing the enemy back across dozens of systems. But the swarm was not finished. The remaining hives had gathered at a massive biological station called the Crucible. It was the last stronghold, the final refuge, and the swarm would defend it with everything they had left. Admiral Daniel Harper stood on the bridge of the UEN Defiance and watched the coalition fleet assemble. It was the largest force in galactic history. 3,000 warships from 47 species, stretching across space like a metal ocean. Humans made up only 12% of the total force, but the coalition had given them command of the assault. They had earned it. Commander stood beside him, her silver eyes fixed on the tactical display. She had become his closest advisor over the past year, bridging the gap between human and alien thinking. They had become friends in a way that neither had expected. "This is it," she said quietly. 300 years of war ending today." Daniel nodded, one way or another. She turned to look at him. "Are you afraid?" He considered the question honestly. Outside the viewports, the Crucible hung in space like a wound in reality. It was enormous, larger than a moon, covered in organic weapons and armor that had been growing for centuries. The swarm fleet surrounding it numbered in the thousands. "Yes," he admitted, "I am terrified." Tilted her head, "Yet you seem calm." "Fear is part of being human. We feel it like everyone else." He met her eyes. "But we do not let it stop us. We take that fear and we use it. It makes us sharper, faster, more aware. It reminds us that we have something to lose." "And what do you have to lose today?" Daniel thought of Earth. He thought of the blue oceans and green forests. He thought of the cities full of people who were counting on him to keep them safe. He thought of his daughter, who had just turned 12, and who had made him promise to come home. "Everything," he said simply. "I have everything to lose. That is why I will not fail." The battle began at dawn by Earth Standard Time. The coalition fleet advanced in waves, with human ships leading the charge. They hit the swarm defensive line like a hammer, breaking through the first layer of defenders within minutes. But the enemy regrouped quickly, swarming around the attackers like angry insects. Ships died by the dozens. Cruisers exploded under concentrated fire. Fighters were torn apart by acid cannons. Human destroyers vanished in balls of plasma and twisted metal. The space between the two fleets became a graveyard. Captain Laura Mitchell commanded a squadron of frigates on the left flank. She had been promoted 3 times since first contact, rising through the ranks on a mixture of skill, determination, and pure stubborn refusal to give up. Her ships cut through the swarm formation like a knife, clearing a path for the heavier vessels behind her. "Keep pushing," she ordered over the communication channel. "Do not let them reform." On the right flank, led his own squadron in a diversionary attack. He drew enemy ships away from the main force, dancing through their formations and picking them off one by one. He had become famous throughout the coalition for his unorthodox tactics, but today he was playing things carefully. The stakes were too high for unnecessary risks. The battle raged for hours. The coalition pushed forward, then was pushed back. Ground was gained and lost and gained again. The crucible seemed to grow larger with every passing minute, but they were getting closer. Then the swarm launched their final counterattack. A wave of ships emerged from the crucible itself, fresh reserves that had been held back for this moment. They slammed into the coalition formation with devastating force, breaking through the lines and threatening to split the fleet in two. Daniel watched his tactical display turn red with warnings. They were losing. Despite everything, despite all their sacrifices, they were losing. He made his decision. "All hands, this is the Admiral. I am taking the Defiance forward on a direct attack run. Our target is the Crucible's power core." He paused. "This is a one-way mission. Anyone who wishes to evacuate should do so now." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, his officers shook their heads. "We are with you, sir," his first officer said, "to the end." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or grief. It was hard to tell the difference. "Then let us finish this war." The Defiance surged forward, its engines burning at maximum power. Swarm ships moved to intercept, but the rest of the human fleet covered the flagship's advance. Ships threw themselves into the path of enemy fire, sacrificing themselves to keep the Defiance flying. Grabbed his arm. "Daniel, there must be another way." He looked at her and smiled sadly. "There is not, we both know that." He reached out and touched her face gently. "Tell them what we did here today. Tell them that humans kept their promise. We said we would fight until the end, and we did." "Daniel." "It has been an honor, Commander." The Defiance hit the crucible at full speed. The impact tore through layers of organic armor and burrowed deep into the station's heart. Daniel stayed on the bridge until the last possible moment, guiding his ship toward the power core that kept the entire structure alive. When the Defiance detonated, the explosion was visible from every ship in the fleet. The crucible tore itself apart. Secondary explosions ripped through its structure as power systems overloaded and organic matter burned. The swarm ships around it went mad, firing at random, crashing into each other, dying in the flames of their own fortress. The coalition fleet watched in stunned silence as their greatest enemy fell. Laura Mitchell was the first to break the quiet. Her voice came over the communication channel, rough with emotion but steady. "All ships, this is Captain Mitchell. Admiral Harper has completed his mission. The crucible is destroyed." She took a deep breath. "The war is over. We won." Across 3,000 ships from 47 species, cheering erupted. Aliens who had never shown emotion wept openly. Soldiers embraced each other, overwhelmed by relief and grief and joy. On her damaged cruiser, Commander stood alone on the bridge and stared at the space where the Defiance had been. Tears ran down her blue cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She had seen many heroes in her long life. She had seen courage and sacrifice from a dozen species, but she had never seen anything like Daniel Harper. She had never seen anyone who was so afraid and so determined at the same time. The memorial was built 6 months later on the ruins of a prime. It was a simple structure of black stone, rising from the dead earth like a promise. The names of every soldier who had died in the final campaign were carved into its surface. Human names and alien names together, side by side, equals in death as they had been in battle. At its center stood a statue of Admiral Daniel Harper. The humans had not asked for it. The coalition had insisted. Laura Mitchell, now Admiral Mitchell, gave the dedication speech. She stood before representatives of 47 species and spoke the words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. "We were a legend to you," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "A warning in old archives. A species too violent, too stubborn, too dangerous to be allowed into your civilization. Maybe you were right to fear us." She paused and looked at the faces around her. Aliens who had dismissed humans as primitives. Aliens who had expected them to fail. Aliens who had watched them win. "But now you know the truth. We are not your enemies. We are the ones who stand beside you when everything else has fallen. We are the ones who do not stop. We are the ones who refuse to let the darkness win." She raised her head and spoke the final words. "We are humanity, and we are here to stay." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the cheering began. It spread from ship to ship, planet to planet, system to system. The galaxy had been saved, and everyone knew who had saved it. Commander found Laura after the ceremony. They stood together at the base of the memorial, looking up at the statue of the man who had given everything. "Do you think he knew?" asked quietly. "When he made his choice, do you think he knew what it would mean?" Laura considered the question. She thought of Daniel Harper, a tired man with gray hair and kind eyes, who had carried the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. "I think he knew exactly what it would mean," she said finally, "and I think he would do it again without hesitation." Nodded slowly, he was a good man. He was human. Laura smiled, and there was pride in sorrow and something like hope in her eyes. That was enough. Above them, the stars burned bright and cold. Somewhere out there, the scattered remnants of the swarm were still running. They would never stop running. The galaxy had seen what humans could do. And the galaxy would never forget.